this all went down, I went on to DoorDash to see if they're even on there to be able to take an order for at least a pickup. And they didn't. Now, that's unfortunate because a company like that, with such great people working for it, gosh, I'd like to see that place still running, right? But it's looking like they might not be opening up again.
Oh, that's devastating.
Exactly, because especially when you have memories there, you go to a place like that and you have memories, right? Oh, remember that time when blah 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 blah. Well, now they're gone. It's like it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I actually heard uh, up on social media that they were saying that there's something like 1,800 restaurants in the area that they're projecting won't ever open again.
Right.
And I'm sure that you would probably uh, feel safe to say that a lot of it has to do with there's probably a lot of factors involved, but one of them probably being is that their digital marketing is probably one of the factors.
Yeah, and see, so digital marketing applies to a lot of different things. That's a very general term. I just call it the digital world anymore because it could be e-commerce, it could be social media, it could be website, it could be online advertising, it could be a number of different. It could be local SEO, it could be a number of different things within that. And so, yeah, it's very important to consider that, without a doubt.
I think of when I was getting really involved with getting my company up and going, and I remember that feeling of actually feeling a bit overwhelmed, of thinking of my website, what all has to be on the website, or then thinking of social media. Uh, you know, um, that's I like to call it as like an animal itself. Is that there is so many different platforms and stuff, and so many different things coming out, and I then would look to other people and say that were in businesses and stuff and say, okay, like what are you using? And I then got so many different variances from different people that I was actually more confused than I was feeling like I got answers. So, uh, what are some of the myths that are out there, and what are some of the is there kind of a rule to follow? When it comes to social media, when you're putting your business out there, is it just like all across the board, or should you really focus on one area? And then when you get that going, then add on, or like what's all that consumed? Help
Well, I
us
think,
help us through this.
yeah, I hear you. Again, every business is different, but when I think about when I think about your question, the very first thing that came to mind was we should not act any differently online than we should in the physical world. If you're starting a business, let's just say it's a shop of some sort, you're going to do the research that you need to do in order to be successful. You're going to look at location, right? The different locations. What's working? What are the demographics like there? Do I envision a shop being here and people and getting foot traffic? Things of that nature. That, all that stuff still applies in the digital world. In fact, what I find is that people have this notion that the digital world is somehow different. It is not. It is only an extension of our lives. So we don't act any differently. All the things that you would do, like you were just talking about, which is like you went out and researched, right? Which was a great thing that you did. You have to do that in the digital world too. So there's nothing there that you did wrong. That's for sure. In fact, you were doing everything right. But then you just got to apply it. The one thing I would add to that is apply it to whatever your 5-year plan is. Look out at what you want your business to look at like 5 years from now. And then start picking those applications that you're talking about that fit into that. Because I do find people will find short-term solutions to get up and running, and then sometimes find themselves having to sort of, what we call in the IT world, rip and replace. They'll have to get rid of an entire app where there's all this data located, and then they'll have to move to a different solution because now they've grown, and that old solution just doesn't fit them anymore. So when you're picking things, that's another thing. Just keep in mind what your business really wants to look like 5 years from now, and then make your decisions on what the tools that you use on that, right? What's that going to look like? What you're doing today, what is it going to look like 5 years from now? And try to do the best you can to predict that. Of course, nobody's perfect, right?
Well, no, absolutely. And as you say that, I guess I'd like to dive into that a little deeper, because one of the things that I found evolving, and I think it's kind of parallel in many ways, is that in having a podcast, is that it evolves over time, just like a business, is that it evolves over time. So, when you start a business or you start a podcast, is that you have a certain idea in your mind of what that looks like. And sometimes that you can get so fixated on what you think it's supposed to look like in the ever after. I call it like the ever after story, because I got fixated on that ever after story of the podcast. And so I was like, okay. And the person that I had working with me kept saying, Kim, just do it. And my OCD self was like, oh, no, I need to have all this. No, I need to have all this done. And he was so patient, and he was so wonderful, and he just kept saying, no, Kim, just start, just keep going. And finally, I just did what he asked. And even as short as 3 weeks in, things started changing. And the same thing holds true when you're starting a new business too, is that there's a certain aspect that you have an overall view of what you're trying to do, but at a certain point you just have to begin.
That's exactly it. So there's two things there. You said evolving. Your digital world is going to evolve all the time because new things are going to come around, and maybe your plan changes, right? So again, I'm back to, you don't do anything different in the digital world than you do in the physical world, right? Your business is going to evolve. Well, guess what? Your podcast is going to evolve. Your social media marketing plan is going to evolve, and so on and so forth. Don't expect anything different. That is the beauty of digital, is you can, websites, you can change them all the time, right? But there's no such thing in the digital world, in my mind, that what we call a set and forget. That doesn't exist. If you want to be effective, there's no set and forget. And you see a lot of people do that, right? They'll sign up with these custom building websites, and you just put up what I would call a software brochure, and they just leave it there. And then they go, well, I didn't get anything out of that. Well, you didn't. Did you do any analytics on it? Did you find out, what people were doing? So the second part of what you said, which is the do. So I have my own 80-20 rule. It goes like this: 80% is do. It's action. Do it, right? The other 20% is what I call the 3 L's: look, listen, and learn. And you take that information and you bring it back to the do column. And what you're describing is a person that has flip-flopped that, right? They did all the looking and listening and learning in the 80%, and then the 20% is do. You just got to flip that around. Because the beauty of the digital world is that it's forgivable, right? As long as you're learning and you're taking that information and changing things up, it can work. In fact, it's highly recommended.
That is probably the number one biggest lesson that I have learned in both of my business and my podcast is that it is forgiving, and it is changing. You just need to give yourself a little bit of time to kind of figure out what your groove is, and you'll it's kind of like it's like when you're in a relationship, it takes time to kind of learn that other person, and you're always finding out new things about a person. It's the same thing in your relationship with your business and
Right.
with digital marketing stuff, is that you start to get an idea of things that are and are not working. And so, and then you start to have different ideas that evolve in your head. I love the ideas that come at 3:00 in the morning. They wake you up, and you want to act on it. That those things will happen, and you have to allow for those things to happen. And that kind of leads me into my next question: is that you will make mistakes though too. And what are like some of the biggest mistakes that people can make online?
Oh, that's yeah. I would say the first and foremost thing is that I see is not really bringing value. Whenever you're online, we have to understand that we're not in a room with somebody, right? Because our sheer presence can create connection, right? By being in the same room. If you're on social media and you're on a website, they don't know you. So the very first thing that has to happen is bring value. So what I see as a mistake is people are what I call contributing to the noise. They just feel like they just need to start pumping things out, but not really recognizing if it's working. It's just like somebody told me I should just post a bunch of stuff. But it's not. In a lot of cases, there's no value being brought there. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is, again, back to listening to your audience, and that's how you're going to find out if you're valuable, right? See what's working. I mean, you have all the tools in front of you in a digital world with analytics, right? It'll tell you if you get likes, engagement, comments, all that stuff, right? Pay attention to that stuff, because you'll start seeing, there's been some activity here, and then take a good study on why that worked, right? And why this other thing didn't work. But always be listening and learning from your audience, because they're eventually going to tell you what they like and what they don't like. It was interesting because I was just listening, it was maybe over the weekend, I listened to Joe Rogan. Of course, everybody knows that guy and his podcast, right? And he says, I know when I did a really good podcast, when all my friends in total will text me and go, man, that was a good one. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So he's listening to the audience, which in this case are his friends, right? The third thing is just back to what I said before, which is not put enough percentage in the do category. There's a guy that does online advertising that's very well known in that space, named Frank Kern. And he has a statement that he says all the time, which is, people will spend hundreds of dollars buying courses on how to learn how to do this, but not want to spend $100 on placing the ad for themselves.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on that, because I think that's a really good point. Is that I think that the dollar value that people feel from advertising outside of digital marketing versus the marketing outside, somehow has gotten gray. where people feel that that if they're paying for marketing outside, that somehow it's justifiable, but that all of a sudden, if they have to pay for something that's online, that somehow that it's like they shouldn't have to. That somehow it's not. And I think this is a good conversation to touch on for a second. Is that that this is the world we live in now, and in social media, and so making sure that maybe that you are taking some of those funds and understanding that that needs to be put into the social media marketing to get your business going, is that to have 100% effective social media is not going to come from 100% free putting on Facebook
Right.
or
We're in a culture of free, right?
or Instagram, and I think that's I really think that that's a myth that people really believe, is that they just put it on there, and it's not something that is a known fact. That
Right.
understanding the business side of social media.
Right, you're exactly right. Again, we're in a culture of free.
Mm-hmm.
So, social media has a low barrier of entry, right? Like, there's no barrier of entry whatsoever. You can get online, create yourself an account, and start ripping out some posts. But unfortunately, again, it goes back to it doesn't really provide value. Another part of the problem here is, and this goes to the myths part of what you were saying, and one of the earlier questions is that, social media specifically is still quite a new solution. It's still, in my mind, in its infancy. And I say that because when I look back at email, remember when email came out?
Mm-hmm.
I have the most ridiculous story about that. Email comes out. I'm working at a company. And now we're going from the yellow pages, making calls, because I was a sales guy at the time, to now we got a computer in front of us, some old Toshiba computer with a floppy disk in it, and we got Explorer for email, right? What's the first thing that happened? Everybody used it for jokes and porn, right? So my point of saying that is, anytime there's a new tool that comes out, it's usually at the beginning stages used for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And then what happens is that it flattens out a little bit, and it becomes a mode, some kind of efficient tool, or should I say a tool of efficiency. So now we look at email as a tool of efficiency in a big way. In fact, I don't know personally anybody that does joke emails anymore. It's usually used for work and getting communications out there and doing your job. And that's kind of, that infancy is where I see the infancy of email. I see that in social media too, where it's really not quite being used to its full capacity yet. There's still more, and Facebook's changing things left and right, and they're adding new features and things of this nature. And because Facebook owns Instagram, they're adding new features, and so it will become an effective tool. Because right now you're seeing a lot of memes, you're seeing a lot of jokes, you're seeing a lot of video, stuff like that, just like the email days, right? But it can be a very effective tool, and it will be, right? The thing about it is, if you want to talk about myths further, back to that infancy, is that I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm sure everybody has, is this whole rush right now of ads that you get in your social media that say, I can make you $1 million overnight, or I can get you 1,000 followers tomorrow.
Yes.
There's like these, it's like they're really latching onto these, like what I call silver bullet solutions, and it never works. I can poke holes in every single one of those, because I'll tell you the truth on all that stuff, because as a digital marketer, believe it or not, I often sign up for other people's solutions to find out what they're doing, to see if they're just fooling around or if they're providing value, right? I learn from other people that way. So don't ever believe, the myth there is, is the claims that they tell you that can happen. Because the other myth is that, the online world is somehow simple and it doesn't take time. I can guarantee you it takes just as much time to be online as it does to be in the physical world for your business.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time. And then, again, people also think they can act differently on there. Going back to what I said about the people that are doing these outrageous claims, people think they can act differently online, or somehow the digital world is different, so you can act differently. Like you got all these trollers and stuff like that are going on. Well, you wouldn't do that to me if you were in the same room with me, right? I mean, you're dressed really nice. You look like you're at work, right? You're not acting any differently right now. So I'm not showing up in my bathrobe just because I'm online, right? So the myth there is don't act. You don't get the ability to act differently just because you're online.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and that's very much, I think that can go down so many different roads.
Right.
In that one sentence is that you have to be. I think that people out there are smart enough they can see through when people are being real and when people aren't, and people want they want authenticity, and that's the number one thing that whatever it is that you're putting out there needs to be authentic, and people need to feel that it's coming from the heart, no matter what it is that you're putting out there. It doesn't matter if it's insurance, it doesn't matter if it's marketing, it doesn't matter if it's finance, whatever it is, it has to be authentic. People have to know that it's real, that it's true, that it's believable, and that if they were to look it up, that they can that it's factual.
Right. And again, just as long as they wouldn't do anything differently than they would do if they were standing right in front of you.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's it's the fastest way to lose credibility as fast as you can gain credibility.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And you're building, when you're doing the online thing, you're building all this content, right? And so you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward on that authenticity.
No, absolutely. I think that I'd like to kind of, I don't want to give too much away, because if people want to go more down, you're the person that they should set up some time and meet with and talk with and stuff. But I would like to dabble just a little bit into it and have a tiny little conversation on it, just because I can get you to do that.
Right.
Is that as you're putting stuff on social media and stuff, is that is there things that you continue to build on, like it's a story, or do you just repeatedly put the same type of things out there?
That's interesting that you say that. So our company has a strategy that we call 411. And it's built on a strategy we've been using for the past decade. And so this is kind of pre-information for your folks out there, right? The 4, it's a ratio. 411, it's not information, it's actually a ratio. The 4 is news and entertainment, things that are really more about your audience. You don't ever talk about yourself in these posts, right? entertaining, or you might do start a conversation. You might actually do some polls or something like that. But it's really centered around the audience for those 4 posts, okay? To get them engaged, right? Then there's the one after the 4, which is what we call soft promotion. Now, soft promotion is where you don't try to sell something, but you might mention yourself. But it doesn't come with like a call to action, so to speak. It's more like, in an example, you might post about a partner of yours. Hey, I'd really like to thank my partner for the great, and you tag them, right? And so you're giving them, you're talking about yourself a bit, right? But you're including other people. It's almost like you're talking about yourself, but you're including the community as well, right? And then the last one is hard promotion, and that's where you sell something. That is where you go, hey, I've got a 20% discount on such and such. Click here to get your coupon. That's a strategy that seems to really work, because I think we often forget that, again, we don't act any differently, and just because it's digital doesn't mean that there's not a human on the other side. So think about this. If you and I first met, Kimberly, and all I did was for 2 hours just talked about myself. Never asked you once about who you are, what you do, how you feel about things. You'd probably be like, I don't know if I want to hang out with that guy anymore. It's a little exhausting.
Right.
Right? So here again, you wouldn't do anything differently when you go on social media. So that's my biggest suggestion. Again, you're providing value, right?
Right. I think that's amazing information. Is that people do forget, because our gut reaction is when we put stuff out there is that we want to have that response. Is that when we put the business stuff out there, is that I'm just going to say it for all of us. We want people to want what it is that we are selling. Right. There's no way around it. I mean, we're all human, and we all are getting up every day, and now social media is where we have to go and put our office, and so that's what we're wanting to do.
Yeah, the greatest analogy I've ever heard on that level is, would you walk into a room, find a really attractive person, and then ask them to marry you?
Right. Right.
And that's what it's like if you're just going straight for the sale right out of the gate. And I've done 25 plus years of sales. I guarantee I've never done that. There's no way I go to a customer and just try to sell something right away. You got to know who they are. You got to get to know them. You got to, there's a bunch of stuff that you have to do before you can even consider selling anything to them.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I can share in that story, Kak, is that I spent almost 25 years in the packaging industry, and I can tell you that for a brand new customer, that it's a 3 to 6 month cycle.
There you go.
To get that customer on, especially if it's a cold call.
Right.
So it takes time to build that rapport to get them where it is that they're actually putting that order. And, somehow that seems acceptable. And now with social media, we feel like we're automatically invited into people's homes, and that we're automatically on the couch with them, having a drink. To put it metaphorically.
We didn't have to work for it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's
Absolutely.
The thing. That's that low barrier of entry, right? That actually I should really call it a no barrier of entry. And it's just like, okay, I can do this, and something's going to happen. Well,
right.
That's not necessarily the case. It takes time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you bringing out that, allowing me a little bit of luxury of going on that point, because I think it's really important that especially those who have started a new business or have been in a business venture or during this pandemic and stuff have been struggling
Right.
what to do and stuff, and having to understand that even though I think that there may be this myth that because of this pandemic and people are home and people are spending so much more time on social media, that there was going to be this automatic shift of, because people saw you more, that boom, right away. No, there's still that dating time.
There is. You're exactly right. And I could tell you from my own experience of running my own ads that, yeah, there's just, I literally, when we went into this pandemic, you have to change your messaging completely. The whole message changes at this point.
Right.
Because our worlds have changed. If you go with the same messaging that you had before, it's not going to work right now. It's just simply not. You're going to be wasting your money.
Right. No, you're so right. You have to change your message, and you may be reaching more people, but you still have the same amount of time it's going to take before you're going to start seeing some turnaround. You're just reaching maybe a bigger audience during a time of day that you would not have reached before.
Right.
So, kudos to all of us to having that opportunity. But now you just have to we all have to just kind of wait. You just have to put it out there. So thank you for expanding a little bit on that, because I think it was an important conversation to have. I think it's one that we all struggle with on a regular basis out there. I think we all kind of have days where we beat our heads going, wait a minute, I've spent all this time on social media over and over and over again, and when's that gonna pay off? So with all of that being said, then this is my question to you, is that what should be the very first step a person should take when they're getting into the online world?
First one is really presence. And I see a lot of people that have been living in the physical world that don't even have a presence online. That's a problem, because we're all driven to get online right now because of this pandemic. So first and foremost, get online. A couple other things I'd include in that is, when you do get online, make sure that you have brand consistency. Why is that important? Let me tell you why. It's a great story, actually, because I'm the fool in this story. I found, because I'm basically building a gym in my garage, and I found a really nifty workout piece of equipment, and it was $20. I said, great. Boom, I hit the buy button, right? Paid for it with PayPal or whatever, and off we ran. And I didn't see it for 2 weeks, and I got the mail, and I opened up the package, and inside was a rubber band. So I paid $20 for a rubber band. Is what it came down to. So the more important story of that is that I didn't do my research, right? So, but now I want you to think about, when I did my research, I looked at the Facebook site. I went to the web page, which was different. It was not the same name as the Facebook. Different colors, different name. And when I went to pay, it was a different name there too. I got the receipt. It was a different name from all three of those. I basically did research and found out it was some kind of distributor. It was some kind of shell distributor out of California. It was a Chinese company really that was using a California location as a shell location. And that's because I didn't do my research. Now, had I done my research, I would have never bought from that company. But you could see, because of that, brand consistency is huge. right? Think about how we sometimes say, I'm going to go to my doctor, I go to my doctor, but I'm going to get a second opinion, right? The same thing applies when you're online, because people will actually, and I do this, I literally do this, I go, okay, LinkedIn, okay, are they on Facebook? Right? Oh, they're not, or it's not the same thing. I actually had a situation one time I was trying to reach somebody, and I went to, I forget where I started. I think I started at LinkedIn, but their LinkedIn, the information on the LinkedIn wasn't right. And then I went to find them on Facebook, and the information was different, and that wasn't right. And I ended up going to 2 or 3 different sources to find the correct information to be able to contact the person. Now, I knew the person was real, but had I been because I knew who that person was, but had I not known that person, I would have stopped dead in my tracks and been like, no, this isn't even a real company. So make sure your brand is consistent across all the different channels you use online. That is absolutely key. Because it basically it builds trust with the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I learned, is that settling on the main logo that I wanted to use for my company. And then I have 3 different areas underneath my company. But I have a logo for my podcast, and then I have a logo for the other things that I do. But I always make sure that I bring my company logo with every single one of those, so that people understand that it's all connected.
Yeah, exactly. That's good stuff.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you're structuring content. And that's a good one, because, you hear a lot about content is king. Well, what I say is content is garbage if it is not structured. And you're structuring your content, which is great.
Oh, well, good.
Because think about a book, right? This is a great example. You do a book, and what's in a book? Chapters.
Mm-hmm.
That is the structure of a book, because people want structure. If they like one of the 3 things that you do, Kimberly, they're going to go to that one thing, and as long as you structured all your content under that one thing, they're going to be very happy, and they're probably going to retain them as a consumer of that content. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
But that's another thing I see is people push. That goes to the contributing to the noise piece that I said earlier. Don't just push things out. Push it out with a structure, right? Make sure people understand where this falls under in terms of a subject.
Yeah,
that's absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I absolutely agree. I think it's so important that everything has continuity, and that everything follows a certain protocol that within your company. Is that how is it that you want things to flow? And it is okay to have different levels of things and stuff, as long as there's a protocol for it.
Right.
As long as you, as you're talking about, as long as you have, structure to it, as long as you have a storyline for people to follow that is consistent, then you are right on track, and you will be successful in what it is you're doing.
Right.
But that has to be there. If it's all over the place, then people will get lost, and when people get lost, they don't want to spend the time, nor should they, because there's a lot of other stuff out there that they don't have to spend the time. And so they have places where they can go that is like what you do, where they have a storyline to follow. So
exactly, that's
you
key.
have to figure out how you're going to stand out from somebody else that is going to make you somebody they want to follow.
Right, and that's absolutely right. And the bottom line of all that is to make it easy for them. Don't make it hard for them to find your information. Make it easy for them, right?
Yeah.
Great example would be blogging. I see a lot of people that do blogging. but they don't categorize the blocks in terms of what the subject matter is. Because maybe, if you think about it, if a person is into, I don't know, this is mindfulness, and they want to read more about it, but you haven't created a structure for which they can now follow all the other content that you do about mindfulness, you're going to leave that person in the dust. A good example, a study that was done, let's take websites for instance, in terms of making it easy for people. There is a study out there, and I'm just going to generalize, but basically they say every time somebody has to make a click on your website, you've lost a quarter of your audience, right? So, person comes in to your website, okay, they're going to click on what they're interested in. If they have to click again, you're going to lose a quarter of those people. Right, you're going to lose, I should say, you're going to lose a quarter of people right out of the gate from the website because maybe it just doesn't match them. Then they're going to click on something, you're going to lose a quarter there. If you make them click again, you'll lose another quarter. Now you're only down to a quarter of the people. Right? So the concept is, make it, that structure makes it easier for people to consume your content. And they're going to appreciate it. And they're going to stick with you because of it.
Right. Absolutely. I 100% agree. With that is that, what should we be looking forward to as we start looking forward in the future, in the digital world? How do you see things, changing?
The number one thing is going to be e-commerce. I mean, everybody's going to have to be looking at e-commerce. Now, here's the thing, is this, people will say, well, I have a service. I don't know if I can do any e-commerce on there. Well, you can. If you just sit down with somebody like myself and go over your business, there's ways of productizing a service online. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll actually do the actual service or sell the actual service, but you can actually break a service up into bits of content that can be sold online and affordable for somebody that happens upon your digital environment.
That's awesome. That's great advice. I think that that's something that we all need to be, looking at. That gets into a whole nother episode.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, because there's a lot to talk about there.
There's a lot to talk about. Yeah. I foresee us bringing Mr. Kak Varley back for a whole nother subject because you have now percolated something that all of us are going, Mr. Valerie.
Digital world is so vast, right? There's a lot to talk about, trust you me. And I love talking about it because, like, the myths part of this conversation was great because, people get caught up in the myths, and I have a whole mission to basically blast those out of the water if I can, So, and I'll be happy to help people.
I just feel like I spend a lot of time on social media, and I feel like I'm just barely scratching the surface of really starting to come to an understanding of what to be doing. And a lot of people, come to me and ask me a lot of questions thinking that, I have a lot of answers because they look at the amount of time that I spend on there of, promoting my business on there. And I feel like, I'm not the right person to be asking because I feel like, I'm just in the infancy stage of learning all the ins and outs of things that I'm doing. I feel for what I know that I'm getting much better at what it is that I know. But that's all I'm really good at claiming. I refuse to claim anything more than what it is that I know. So that's where I love being able to send people to UCAC that knows more than moi, that can answer all those questions. And where's a good spot of your website where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's kakvarley.com. So I make it really simple. It's my name. KAK, V as in Victor, ARLEY.com.
So, and here's the thing too, is that when we download this, we will have CAC's website up there so that people will be able to just click on it and go to your website. So we will make that available to them. So we have had a great conversation today, I think, on this. We've touched on a lot of subjects. I hope that everyone out there was able to at least get maybe a couple of their myths answered today. And if they created more questions,
debunked, right?
Yeah, debunked. Yeah. Absolutely. And I would not be shocked at all if the myths that were debunked created more questions, because I know that tends to be the thing with me when it comes to social media. If that
if anybody has a question that wants to send you a question, have them send you a question. You can send it off to me. I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, absolutely. We will absolutely do that. If there's any questions you want to put in the comments section, we will make sure that any of those questions get to CAC. And he will be right on that. He's so good at getting back to everybody. So we will make sure that happens. Thank you so much for spending the time with us here today. And I promise all of you, I will have CAC back, and we will touch on another area that I will dig into that little brain of his that has all this like great information, and I will dig out information that will be beneficial to all of us, that will he will be surprised that he's sharing. I'll get it out of him so that all of us will have that information and be able to do something that we needed to get accomplished we haven't been able to get done. So,
well, here's the thing. Secrets don't make friends, right?
That's right. That's right. And that's why I'm such good friends with CAC, so that it doesn't have to be a secret any longer. So,
right on.
That's right. So I want to just thank all of you for spending the time with us here today. And I look forward to all of you spending more time with us again when we're on next time. And I also want to share with all of you is that we are getting so much closer to the Envision You summit that's coming. And if you go to envisionusummit.today, you can find all the information on all of these speakers, and you can also find the button to register. So I would encourage all of you to go to that site and look at all the information that there is there. We're so excited to have all of you join us on June 13th and participate and see everything that the speakers have to offer. It's going to be a wonderful day of really finding out about owning who you are as a woman, all the unique characteristics. Doesn't matter if it has to do with business or your personal, but owning any adversities or any flaws that you think you have, and understanding that those don't define you. They're only moments in time, and that you can use those as your sounding board to build off. And you know what? Whatever it is that you want to achieve, it is possible. Those are your things that you have. It's kind of like getting your PhD in life, and now you have, I look at it as that it's like building a house. You now have all your tools, and you have all your construction supplies that you need to build your house. So what do you want it to look like? So again, it's envisionusummit.today. And as I always say at the end of every podcast, is there are goals, and then there are your goals. Imagine what you could accomplish if you just get out of your own way. And my dear friend, I look forward to having you here again. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.